All right, Pentium, 1.7 gigahertz. So, thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Steve.
So, in our showdown, we've got an 867 megahertz G4 against a 1.7 gigahertz Pentium 4. And in the showdown, in the showdown, the G4 completed the task in 45 seconds. The Pentium 4 took 82 seconds for the same exact task. That means the G4 at this task is 80% faster than a 1.7 gigahertz Pentium. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can this be? How can this be? The answer to this question is a technical one, but the name that we've given it is the megahertz myth. And to explain the megahertz myth for us, I've asked John Rubinstein, our Senior Vice President of Hardware at Apple, to come up and give us a brief tutorial on the megahertz myth. John? Thank you. All yours.
Thank you, Steve. Morning, everybody. Okay, so you just saw the G4 beat the Pentium 4. And some of you are thinking to yourselves, wait a minute, 1.8 gigahertz, that's twice as fast as 867 megahertz. And those of you that are thinking this are suffering from belief in the megahertz myth. And that is that megahertz equals performance. But megahertz does not equal performance. It's just a contributing factor to performance. Now, to understand this, we have to look at how processors are designed. There's a lot of complicated trade-offs in processor design. And I've picked 4 of the key architectural trade-offs for us to look at. Of course, there's frequency. We want to run as fast as possible. The frequency will be based on what process we're in and the number of pipeline stages. The more pipeline stages we have, the less work we do every cycle. And so the faster the pipeline can run. These two are very much related. And there's some real downsides to having long pipelines. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Then there's a number of functional units. The more functional units you have, the more parallelism you can have. That's how many instructions you can execute every cycle. And the cache design. Whether you have a level 1, or the size of the level 1, size of the level 2, and if you have one, the level 3 cache. So all of these factors play into what the performance of the processor, not just frequency. So let's look at some examples of this. Here are the 4 leading processors in the industry today. The PowerPC G4, my personal favorite, the Pentium 4, Intel's next generation 64-bit architecture, the Itanium, and Sun's latest Spark processor, the UltraSpark 3. We can compare several characteristics of these processors. We can look at the process, the size, the number of pipeline stages, and how many megahertz they run at. Now, it's interesting. Most people would assume that because the Pentium 4 runs at 1.8 gigahertz, that it would be in a much faster process. But the reality is all 4 of these processors are in the same process, give or take. And it's interesting to note that the G4 is a very efficient design, because it's half the size of the other processors. Now let's look at how Intel got to 1.8 gigahertz. They did that to going to 20 pipeline stages. Now we see that the G4 is only 7 pipeline stages. So you're thinking, well, what's a pipeline stage? So all processors execute instructions through their pipeline. This is a very simplified version of it. It's a 4-stage pipeline. Instruction gets fetched, decoded, executes, and the results stored. Now all the processors we're looking at have more pipeline stages in this, and they have 1 or more of these pipeline stages broken down into multiple pipeline stages. Let's look at an example of this. We have the 7-stage G4 versus the 20-stage Pentium 4 here, and we're going to execute equivalent instruction streams down these pipelines. So we see instructions flowing down the pipeline, and the short pipeline starts getting results sooner. It takes us a while to fill the longer pipeline. Now we start seeing some results coming off the long pipeline. So right off the bat, the long pipeline has a disadvantage in that it takes longer time to fill. Now, every cycle we're executing one instruction and completing it. So you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, the longer pipeline is running twice as fast as the shorter pipeline. And so at some point in time, it's going to catch up to the short pipeline and pass it. And that would be true in the ideal case. But it's not a perfect world. And there's inefficiencies associated with long pipelines. That's been called in the press lately the pipeline tax. And the pipeline tax occurs because there are bubbles in the pipeline that come from data dependencies. That's where one instruction is dependent on the data from a previous instruction. Or even more catastrophic is certain branches can cause the entire pipeline to drain. So let's take a look at this again. Now again, we're going to run the same instruction stream down both of these pipelines. We see that the short instruction pipeline starts generating results first, and you start to see some bubbles. So we see bubbles. Now bubbles can be one to many clock cycles. Now we see a branch. That's the red instruction. You notice the pipeline drains. Now the instructions get to the end of the long pipeline, and that one drains. So we see that whenever we hit one of these kind of branches, we pay an enormous penalty for having that long pipeline. Now the short pipeline drains. We see a variety of bubbles, more branches, and we see that the longer pipeline falls farther and farther behind the short pipeline. Okay, there's the last branch on the short pipeline. Finish that last instruction. Continue executing along. There's the final branch for the long pipeline. Now these branches, data dependencies, occur very often, right? And it really depends on what your code looks like. Okay, now we'll finish up that last instruction. And we're done on the long pipeline. So let's go back and compare our four processors again. Okay, we have the Pentium 4 running at 1.8 gigahertz and those 20 pipeline stages. It's interesting to look at the Itanium because, again, Intel's next generation processor, they chose to go with 10 pipeline stages. Note that it runs at 800 megahertz. And we see the UltraSpark 3 has 14 pipeline stages and runs at 900 megahertz. So the G4 is an extremely efficient design in that it only has 7 pipeline stages and yet runs at the same speed as other processors that have much longer pipelines. So I hope that this gets you to understand that performance is more than just megahertz. And I hope you're not fooled by the megahertz myth. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. So, again, the megahertz myth. An 867 megahertz G4 can be as fast or even faster than a 1.7 gigahertz Pentium 4, and it gets even better when you add 2 G4s in the multiprocessor model. So these things are very, very fast. Let's talk about availability. Got 3 models. The 733 and the 867 are available starting today. The multiprocessor model will be available starting next month. We also have 3 great displays to go with them. They're fantastic for Mac OS X. They all are active matrix LCD. They are all digitally driven from the computer, so you get the most precise, crisp images. They all have a built-in USB hub, so you get 2 USB ports right on the display, and they are all powered from the computer, so you don't need these power bricks lying around. And all of that is over one cable, the power, the USB, and the digital signaling. So 3 displays. We have a 22-inch cinema display, the finest flat display in the industry by far. Our new 17-inch display, 1280 by 1024, and our 15-inch display, 10 by 7. And 3 aggressive prices. We've lowered the price on the cinema display down to $24.99. Our 17-inch is under $1,000 and $599 for a 15-inch. So these are very, very high quality, very affordable displays that are designed to go perfectly with the Power Mac G4. So I've made a video now that I'd love to show you about our new Power Mac lineup. So let's roll the video.
From science to the arts, and everywhere in between. People are opening up new worlds with the Power Mac G4.
I feel like one of the apes in 2001. It's the monolith. The new Power Mac G4 is going to revolutionize our business. It's not going to change it, it's going to revolutionize it. This is a significant development. This is going to be a really huge breakthrough for a huge industry.
Now there's a new Power Mac G4, a super high-performance personal computer with the power to create, the power to burn, the power to perform like never before.
It's just amazingly fast. I think that's incredible. I think the speed, that kind of boost is phenomenal. We're still reeling from the 733, so I walk in there and it's like, okay, the 733 is now our admin machine. It's amazing.
Apple SuperDrive has added an exciting new dimension to the G4 line. Complex tasks that used to take whole groups of people can now be done with one person on one machine. The new Power Mac G4.
Now I'm so excited because I'm talking with some of our artists about making their own videos. Apple is giving them the power, is actually giving them the power to follow through with their artistic vision, which is after all the reason that we signed them, and they can fulfill it. Apple's making that possible for them, and it's the greatest thing in the world.
The new Power Mac G4 lineup is screaming fast. It starts with a 733 megahertz G4 chip, where you can step right up to 867 megahertz with a 2 megabyte L3 cache, the fastest chip we've ever shipped. At the high end, there's the new bad dog, the dual 800 megahertz G4, the fastest Mac we've ever made.
The modern foundation under Mac OS X takes full advantage of the dual processors, boosting productivity even further with symmetric multiprocessing. The new 867 megahertz system runs Photoshop 50% faster than the latest 1.7 gigahertz Intel system. And with dual 800s, we are running over 80% faster. That's speed you can see, speed you can use. There are 4 PCI slots for expansion, and NVIDIA cards standard across the line.
The new Power Mac G4 and our family of all digital displays are opening up whole new worlds of possibilities.
There are 6 billion bases in the human genome. That corresponds to an information content of 750 megabytes. The data are immense, and in order to think about them, we have to be able to manipulate them. And in order to manipulate 750 megabyte chunks of information, you need very big and fast computers. And for that reason, the G4 caught our attention because it represents another iteration of revolutionary change from the server to the desktop.
When you take something like the G4 and you put dual processors running at 800, that's like twin turbos in our business. J. Walter Thompson is an idea engine, and the Apple Power Mac G4s with their super drives allow us to burn DVDs. And when you're able to burn DVDs real time, that's one less thing you have to wait for. And the less waiting time, the more time you have to be creative.
I've never found an artist who has a problem when I talk to them about Macintosh. They always understand. Digital recording tools, you go to Apple, that's it. CD mastering solutions, Apple. Album graphics, Apple. I've never met anyone who uses anything but Apple. Everyone in this company does. It's all about Apple.
Hallmark isn't just about greeting cards anymore. You see tools like iDVD being priceless in that any